and it runs. Vox Day, thank you for hosting me again in your castle.
Always welcome.
Do you have a pager?
No, I do not.
So you do not use pagers. See, that's quite wise these days.
I don't even carry a cell phone.
Is the West still going to sell any phones or pagers to organization in the BRICS countries from now on?
You would not think so. I think one of the unintended consequences of the pager attacks and the walkie-talkie attacks, presumably, though not definitively, by the Israeli secret services, is that they've compromised the supply chain, and they've shown that they're willing to compromise it and use it. It's not the first time this has happened, but it's the first time that it's happened on a mass consumer scale. It's, in some respects, it's no different than when somebody broke into, poison the Tylenol back in the 80s. That's why you have all those safety seals now. They didn't used to have those. You might not realize if you're younger. And somebody essentially put poison in the Tylenol capsules, and this had a tremendously negative effect on Tylenol sales for a while. And it's why they all have safety seals, in order to demonstrate to the consumers that it's safe. How do you demonstrate to the consumers that it's safe to have a device capable of external triggering, via signal? I mean, I'd heard, I don't know if it's actually true, but I did hear that the Chinese factories are in overdrive now because of all the additional demand for their products. Now, I already use Huawei, so I feel pretty set in that regard.
Now, of course, first of all, should we say that it was a very astute and habile, I don't know if you say in English.
En français.
En français, habile is, not only was it astute as a plan, it's cunning, but also it was delivered with efficiency and skill. So before even I go to the question, let us say that when you say something about the skill of someone doing something maybe bad or whatever you think about it, it doesn't mean you support the person who did it.
No, of course.
I'm just saying, because for the commenters out there.
But I don't really think that it was a particularly skillful attack. I mean, as long as they achieved access to the manufacturing, it was fairly easy. Now it might, it might have been done in an adroit manner. I think I read
adroit. That's the word I was looking for.
I think that I read somewhere that they had spent 5 years arranging to do so. But I mean, the only people that would think that was like particularly cunning and skillful are people in the military and people in government and the media, because they've never actually worked in any manufacturing plant. We manufacture books. We're not doing tens of thousands, but we are doing thousands.
And they're guaranteed without Semtex.
Guaranteed. In fact, we're a pretty organic. Animal glue, animal hides. The paper is from trees. So I'm not sure about the ink. I have to look into the ink, but it's not explosive. And so, but the point is that as long as you have access to the production process, where's the skillful cunning in all of that? I mean,
it's to make sure that batch and only that batch is the tricked one and not the one that goes to people.
That's basic manufacturing.
Okay.
I mean, it's no different than if my father manufactured graphics cards, but we also sold Hitachi monitors. In fact, back in the early 80s and mid 80s, I think my dad was the biggest distributor of Japanese monitors in the United States. And they were done OEM.
Mm-hmm.
So what OEM means is original equipment manufacturing, and you basically rebadge the monitors. So they were not sold as Hitachi monitors; they were sold as artist monitors. Now, of course, you can't do that if it says Hitachi on the front. So all of the machines that came to the United States that were sold as artist monitors, they're exactly the same as the other Hitachi monitors, but they had a different bezel on it, on the front. So companies have been, all you're talking about there is lot identification.
Okay.
So they had one lot that they had made up for Hezbollah, and presumably the others for, general distribution, et cetera, et cetera. It's not that big a deal. It's not that complicated. And, a lot of the celebration of it by some of the enthusiasts in the U.S., I think really indicated a failure to understand exactly what was involved. Now maybe the technical insertion of the explosive, maybe that was done particularly efficiently. I can't speak to that because I don't know. But in terms of just the basic concept, it was not difficult. Separating one lot from another is not just trivial. That's literally done every day by everybody. So that's why I tend to disagree that I don't think that it was a particularly difficult or a particularly clever attack. And I do think that it was, too indiscriminate. And frankly, I think that the consequences are likely to be far worse than anything that they hope to achieve.
Now here's the thing: when you do such an attack, and it seems they had to do it a bit sooner than planned. That's what they say. But certainly, if you do an attack like that seems to create at least confusion in the communication systems of the enemy, and this attack was followed 2 days later by a decapitation attack, or at least an attempt on the military commander of Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Plus all the airstrikes.
And the airstrikes that are going on as we speak. Usually you would do this simultaneously to create chaos, panic, as you would really attack and invade, for example, on the ground.
It would make sense if they had launched the ground invasion 4 days ago.
Exactly.
But they didn't. And so
the surprise element is gone.
Well, and then it raises the question, what's the point?
Because anyone who was killed will be replaced.
Yeah, I mean, it might be useful to degrade the command and control. Certainly, Hezbollah has some presumably skilled leaders, and obviously forcing them to replace them. Are the replacements as capable? Maybe, maybe not. But see, that's the problem. You don't know if the replacement's going to be less effective or more effective. I mean, one thing that we do know about the current, or the until recently, the current Hezbollah leadership, is that they were pretty restrained.
Absolutely.
And that might not be true if they bring in younger, more hot-headed leaders. They might actually be inclined to make the situation much worse than it is. And that's why I find the whole thing very puzzling. Like, why who came up with the idea in the first place? What it was supposed to accomplish? I mean, to me, it sounded and sounds a lot like some of those crazy plans that the Western intelligence agencies came up with during World War II and during the Cold War. Sending an exploding cigar to Castro, putting papers on a dead body and trying to mislead the Germans that way. I mean, there's dozens of examples, none of which have ever accomplished anything There's an Israeli commentator on Social Galactic had a rather neat turn of phrase. He said, this wasn't a military exercise. This was intelligent agencies doing, smart boy gamma stuff just to
Could be.
prove that they're more clever than everybody else.
So you already answered the question I wanted to ask, which is what was the point. So the next one would be, should there be a ground war? This is attrition warfare. This is a very difficult terrain, and against an army which is much more powerful, Hezbollah, which is much more powerful than it was in 2006.
Yeah, I had an interesting conversation just yesterday with a Israeli gentleman that I respect a lot, and he's very, he probably knows a lot of the players personally. And it was interesting talking to him because we were discussing a article that came out a couple months ago, and that might have explained why the ground invasion is essentially being forced upon Israel. And that is that Hezbollah has been systematically attempting to degrade Israelis' air defenses. When you look at all the missiles being launched by Hezbollah, and especially from when they're being launched from Gaza by Hamas, it often looks pointless. Like like you see these videos of a missile, hitting a shed in the middle of nowhere, landing in a parking lot that's empty. That you're like, what are they even trying to accomplish? But apparently, what Hezbollah has succeeded in doing is systematically taking out a lot of the elements that go into making up Israel's Iron Dome system. Because the Israeli air defense system is not like it is in Russia or Ukraine, which is mostly mobile. They've got these the SA-500s and the 400s and the 300s. They're basically giant trucks that drive around and have missile ground-to-air missiles and that sort of thing. It's not like that in Israel. It's all it's all static.
Yeah, and there's a lot of traffic to drive around with such trucks, so they have to be static. It's a small country.
Yeah, it has to be static.
It's a tiny country.
And it wouldn't even make sense really for it to be mobile because But the problem is if it is static,
then it can be targeted.
And so what Hezbollah apparently does a pretty good job at is they'll send some slow dumb missile to try to figure out where the counter battery is going to come from, or where the air defense missile is going to come from. Then once they identify it, then they send more serious missiles and drones after that. According to the piece, they've been very, very successful in this, and that's why 60,000 or more Israelis have had to be evacuated from the north.
True.
They weren't, the media kind of gave you the impression that they were being evacuated for fear of Hezbollah invading, but that's not true. They were evacuated because the air defense system just couldn't protect them.
Yeah, it's too near the border.
Yeah. So now, so what they've been doing is just as the air defense system is degraded, then the areas that haven't been evacuated yet become more and more vulnerable. And so Israel's, according to this, is facing a situation where they need to do the ground invasion in order to prevent being forced to continue to retreat. Now, when I bounce that off this Israeli gentleman I mentioned, he said that it was a reasonable point, but he thinks that Israel has been more able to replace the destroyed installations than the author might understand.
Maybe.
I have no idea whether that's true, but the fact that as long as the evacuations and retreat continues, that's a pretty good indication. And if the people are not returning to where they had been evacuated from, that's a pretty good indication that there's some reason for keeping them out of harm's way, and again, that's why they need to launch that ground invasion, even if it is a very bad idea in terms of the outcome.
Yeah, the problem with first of all, you're right that an Israeli friend of mine told me, tongue in cheek, that he said, well, so far we're not only are we not invading, and he obviously thought they should, but we are in a way being invaded by retreating 10 or 15 miles from the border. So it's kind of, we're losing ground, even if it's not occupied by anyone. But
right, you're still losing the ground.
You're still losing the ground. So he was saying that perhaps he's and there's no credibility in what he said, because it's just an opinion. But if you enter the enemy territory, South Lebanon, by 15, 30 miles, it's one thing. First of all, there is United Nations buffer zone, but okay, you can go through that. If you don't go deep, you will not suffer a lot of casualties, but then you need to protect the ground you just took.
Right.
And if you want to go deep, however, like they did in 1983 or 82, can't remember, 82. Well, then you have to go through fortification, kill zones in the valleys. It's very, very, in Gaza, which is a few square miles, still has not been completely either conquered or pacified.
Yeah.
And so how can they expect to do this on a bigger scale?
Well, there's one way, and that is with U.S. troops. And there's already 40,000 U.S. troops that are in the region. Mm-hmm. There's already 2, maybe 3 carrier groups that are there to provide additional air support.
Some are on the way as well, yeah.
And the 101st Airborne Division is now there. So I think that the reason that the invasion hasn't started yet is that I think that Netanyahu told the U.S. government that they are invading with or without the U.S. And I suspect that the U.S. generals decided that it was better to support the invasion than try to pick up the pieces if everything went to hell.
Yeah.
That's just I have no information. I have no...
How is that?
No one is telling me anything. I'm just looking at the situation, and that's what I'm assuming is...
How would that go down with the American public opinion?
Oh, horribly.
Horribly.
I mean, you'll get some support from the Christian Zionist boomers.
They support anything.
I mean, they're celebrating
They'll cut their own balls if they were told to.
Well, they're celebrating the Gaza cost. I mean, they're literally celebrating, ethnic cleansing. So it's not a surprise that they will support whatever else goes on. I mean, it's a heretical religious belief that is based on a wild misinterpretation of some verses from the Bible. No. We don't need to get into that, but it's not a position that is shared by most Christians. It's not a position that's shared by most Americans. And so...
But what about the armed forces? Aren't they supposed to be ready to invade Russia? Or, protect Taiwan? Invade Iran? They can't do everything at once.
They're not happy, but they do what they're told. I mean,
to a certain extent, yeah.
There's never been a time when after 9/11, I remember telling some friends of mine on my football team who'd asked me that, they're like, "You're the American. What's America going to do?" And I said, "Well, we're going to invade somebody." And they said, "Well, what do you mean somebody?" I said, "I don't know who, and I don't know if they'll have anything to do with it, but and that's what soldiers do. I mean, for crying out loud,
for sure.
Why would anyone in Ukraine even try to fight the Russians at this point? You know, I mean, it's so obvious.
Because you get shot by the Nazis if you don't if you don't fight, if you don't go to the front.
Where are your odds better? Some rear.
Oh, I take the Nazis anytime.
I know. I mean, it's like, okay, so we've got some half-armed rear echelon motherfuckers with pistols.
Yeah.
Versus the entire Russian army.
No, shooting your officer is an option at war, definitely.
Well, they've already shown how several entire units have surrendered, and I mean, there's a specific radio channel that is reserved for Ukrainian units that want to get out of the action. But the point is that if even people in a absolutely hellish situation like Ukraine are just going to follow their orders and do what they're told, of course American troops are. I mean, especially because Americans firmly believe that, you know, they're the greatest, most unstoppable military force in history. You know, both my grandfather and my uncle will tell you that about the U.S. Marine Corps. I mean, they're convinced that the U.S. Marine Corps could take out the entire Russian army itself.
Well, to be fair, and it's one of the points that I agree with our friend Martyanov, and I don't agree on everything, by the way, is that the Pacific War, 41 to 45, is an outstanding economic, planification, logistical, military success. Amazing.
Yeah,
but the rest of American military history?
No, they've never fought a military peer across a large area of land. It just hasn't happened.
No, for sure.
And so
you mean Tunisia doesn't count?
Hey, don't forget Grenada.
And Grenada, that was a victory. There was a good movie on that with Clint Eastwood.
I'm pretty sure I could have done the same thing if I had 4 Ridgebacks and a BB gun, but yeah, it's they're just not aware of the vast scope of military history, and it doesn't mean anything to them, and you can see that in just the total lack of preparation. I mean, they just approved that Nippon Steel could buy U.S. steel. You know, we're leading into a period of war, and you're turning over your largest steel producer, your last steel producer, I think, to foreigners. You know, how are you preparing for anything? The oiler that ran aground last week, or just this week, the oiler for the USS Eisenhower carrier group ran aground. That's the only one they have for that entire carrier group, which means that it's essentially they're trying to scare up a civilian oil tanker that they can use, but then the entire carrier group can only travel at the speed of the oil tanker. I mean, it's crazy. If you look you were talking about the Pacific War and the way that it was executed. Well, they had, if I recall correctly, they had around 40 or so oilers in the U.S. Navy before the war started. Mm-hmm. By the end of the war, they had 170. That's how important they were. Now they've got 9. And now that's 8 that work. And I mean, they're not in any
But
shape.
they have diversity in them.
Well,
and that's important. Yeah, that's the strength.
Yeah, that's when you're selling your military on the basis of its diversity, you're already doomed.
Yes.
You know.
But as we discussed previously, the question is this escalation. Clearly, it is an escalation that we see on all fronts, at least on one side, because on the other side, surprisingly, or maybe perhaps not, there is a lot of retinue, a lot of, it seems to be very calm. Iran has not done much since the last time we spoke. Russia is doing what it's doing, but it's not responding. In fact, it seems that that famous red line is quite wide.
Yeah.
So they are very wise and not hot-headed. China seems to do what it does really good. Time is on their side.
Well, but that's the thing. It's I don't think it's reticence. I think it's discipline.
Yeah.
Because they understand that they're winning, and so I mean, while all of this is going on, people tend to forget that the military is naturally attrited. Even if the military, even at peace, every day they're using up oil and fuel and
accidents, even lives.
Right, and so when they have to actually like deploy and be moving things around, that sort of stuff, you're adding to that cost, and so there's no reason for Russia to pick up the pace any more than it needs to. Who is going to be harmed? Europe. Our fuel prices will probably go up again soon, and that sort of thing. The inflation is hammering the German economy. There's no reason for them to do anything, and so they don't. Mm-hmm. That's why I was paying particularly close attention to the Japanese leadership campaign or contest, because the LDP, the Liberal Democratic Party, whoever heads the party, thereby heads the nation, because they're so dominant. And I thought it was really interesting that the candidate who won, he talks a lot about supporting an Asian NATO. And I tend to think, and I tend to hear that as, so they want to be the next Ukraine. But it's entirely possible that he's actually talking about an Asian organization that does not include the US, and then maybe does not answer to Clown World the way that NATO does. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's very interesting, especially in light of the fact that the Chinese Foreign Ministry came out and said that he was the most appropriate choice. And the Ishida, that's the guy's name, Shigeru Ishida, former defense minister, he specifically said that he wants to put a leash on the U.S. bases and the U.S. forces there. So, I don't think we can say that Japan is about to switch sides or anything, but it does appear that things are gradually moving that way. The
temptation grows.
Yes, because they can see what's happening. I mean, first of all, the Japanese are never going to sign up to fight a proxy war for the U.S. It's not going to happen. They saw what happened in Korea. They played host. They saw what happened in Korea. They see what's happening in Ukraine. They're not stupid. So
no. It's a fascinating time. So October might be a very hot month after all.
It could be. I mean, September's been reasonably calm considering. But Zelensky's attempt to sell his plan for victory, it just amazes me that the media could even report that with a straight face. Yeah. I always wondered how, you read about Hitler, not so much in the bunker, but prior to the bunker, just the confidently giving orders and acting as if, and you think, how could anyone have bought that? And then you see it happening. You talk to people and they're like, well, Russia's only got 2 more weeks. That was 2 years ago.
How is the chips from the washing machines going?
Yeah, but it's going to be interesting to see. The thing that fascinates me most is that nothing has changed between China and Taiwan.
No, but my theory, by the way, since always, is that China has no intention to actually invade militarily Taiwan. It's ready to fight around it, but why? First of all, it's complicated, as we know. In amphibious and airborne warfare, is complicated. Besides, you will never have surprise because the Taiwan has islands which are like 5 miles from the Chinese coast. So first, you need to neutralize these. and the 500 whatever 300 or miles of
also
crossing the straits would be a slaughter, or at least the attrition would be very high, and China has no need to do that.
Everyone on both sides has cousins and
that
brothers and wives
and business interests
and business. So there's no secrets.
And my father used to be in the board of Acer, which is a Taiwanese computer manufacturer. All their factories are in mainland China, which is cheaper. So the interweb of businesses and manufacturing is already there.
Well,
so there's no need to make war from China's point of view.
We've talked before about the fact that Xi was the governor of both, first one and then the other, both provinces that are next to Taiwan.
Yeah.
And so his main job in running those provinces was bringing in Taiwanese investment and Taiwanese business. And so he knows personally a lot of the big movers and shakers in Taiwan. And so I strongly suspect that eventually Taiwan is just going to come out and announce that they've decided to unify.
Yeah.
And maybe there will be a vote, maybe there won't, who knows. But I think it's going to look a lot more like Hong Kong than Ukraine.
The one who has a lot to lose is indeed the US, because China has, in terms of nuclear deterrence, has a problem. Their submarines, as all big nuclear launching submarines, are big, they're a bit more noisy, and
apparently they might occasionally sink.
That can happen.
I don't know if that's true or not,
but certainly the water depth around the coast of China is pretty low. So any of the submarines who leaves harbor is fairly easily detected.
Right.
And however, if China becomes Chinese, the bases on the Pacific side's coast of Taiwan are deep water immediately. So the boomers would. Not the.
I understand.
The boomers would the submarines, the ballistic missile carrier submarines would leave from those bases and be in the 10,000 feet deep immediately in ocean, and much harder to detect. So that would give not an edge, but it would reduce one of the problems of the nuclear deterrence of China.
Well, that might explain why they've German warships and Japanese warships have been sailing the Taiwanese straits. It might not be to intimidate China, and we obviously know it's not about protecting the freedom of navigation.
No.
It might actually be a warning to Taiwan that...
Exactly. Because any in case of a conflict, any ship between Taiwan and China would be obliterated by China, because it's so near to the short battery missiles. However, so all of this is posturing, but indeed it could be to show Taiwan that they have a protection offer that they can't refuse.
Right.
That's probably true, but that won't last long.
No, it's not credible. I mean, the Ukraine has demonstrated how unable to project force in the face of a major regional power it is, and I don't think there's any question that both the Chinese and the Chinese on Taiwan Island understand that completely. Right now, it actually was interesting. I read a piece in Foreign Affairs. Foreign Affairs is basically a public mouthpiece of, it's like The Economist, a public mouthpiece of the clown world. And they were trying to advise the G7 and NATO and all the other clown world organs that they need to accept BRICS. They need to stop pretending that BRICS is just going to go away or it's going to break up. I mean, it was really kind of funny because they said for the last 18 years, people have been predicting that BRICS is going to fail and break up. But it's not going to, clearly. But here's how we could possibly take advantage of natural splits, the factions. But the funniest thing is the two factions are what they call the neutral faction, which is Brazil and India, and then what they call the hostile faction, which is Russia, China, Iran. And what made me laugh is that they're not going to split on an issue that involves the military occupation of Taiwan. Like whether they're neutral or whether they're hostile, they're both completely in accord on not being pushed around by the former West. And so it just made me laugh because they were advising, saying, oh, things need to be more equitable. We can't be banning Russia, or even worse, Belarus, from playing international chess while you let Israel do it.
Yeah, they should have thought about that before, and of course the being pushed around by someone who's actually quite strong, as the British Empire was in the 19th century, whereas the American Empire was in the 20th century, is one thing.
Right.
But being pushed aside by weaklings, and I must say that there was an image that I actually liked, was to see a German, an Italian, and a Japanese warship together in the same picture. I thought that was interesting. But besides that, when you're pushed around by Britain today, which can't even have a single submarine functioning,
and has all of its carriers,
has nothing that works, whether it's military, economically, socially.
They can't send out a carrier to sea, and they can't land planes on the carrier.
Yeah, no. Tell you, last week I was landing in Heathrow coming back from Quebec, from Canada I had a connection in London, and it was early in the morning. It was like 6 a.m. But it felt I arrived in a very cold third world country. Very, very bad. I mean, the people were not working. I mean, you could see the people are not in the job. They're like, don't care. Everything is dirty. Everything doesn't work. Half the stairs don't function. The elevators are broken. I mean, it was like Lagos, but cold.
Huh.
Lagos 30 years ago, because I've not been to Lagos recently, so forgive if you're Nigerian and you correct me if it's now better. But it felt, and that was just the transit of the airport. I didn't even go outside where it probably smells like urine and whatever.
Yeah, I had a friend who went to New York City about 6 months ago, and he was just appalled because he came back and he said, it stinks of marijuana everywhere. And he said I was surprised that there was so much trash and yeah, but it's an empire in decay. I mean,
that's how it looks like. Yeah.
And so hopefully we're going to see more and wiser politicians in the occupied West who understand that things are not the way that they were 40 years ago. You can't just run around doing what the US or what London tells you to do. It's going to be bad for you. I mean, Ukraine wanted to work out something with Russia, and Boris Johnson told them, no, fight them. We'll help you. And that should have been,
I wouldn't give a teenage kid to be in the presence of this guy. He's creepy. All these politicians, by the way, are also creepy.
Oh, 100%.
Besides incompetence and borderline craziness.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how many of them are affected by either the P. Diddy or the Eric Adams. I mean, there's a lot of people who are one step away from a lot of very high level politicians that are now going down for all of the sorts of sordid activities that we've always
Are you saying
assumed.
that Hollywood and the music industry is not a moral place?
That's what I've heard.
Since when? It used to be so great already in the 1920s.
I was on Wax Tracks in the 90s, and they were considered to be, even by the music industry standards, a degenerate record label. And so, but the thing is that what they weren't, I mean, they were honest, open degenerates. Like they weren't trying to like blackmail anybody. They weren't trying to worship the devil. You know, they were just very, very hedonistic.
Enjoying life a bit too much, perhaps.
Well, they were enjoying it while it lasted, because I remember, I think I mentioned this before, you know, I realized like 10 years ago that most of the people that I knew from that industry were dead, you know, and none of them died of old age.
No, but we also discussed offline a few times how much it seems that in not only the Hollywood and the music, but also more and more the politics, there is this grooming of future politicians are groomed since almost childhood
I mean,
to suffer this kind of pervert and this is not enjoying life at all anymore.
It's crazy when you look at how many the young world economic forum leaders. I mean, all of the, you know, Macron, Maloney, Castro, probably 50 more. You look up their biographies, and they all have these little larval politician camps and stuff that they went to, and you know, where they were, like you said, groomed and indoctrinated and God knows what else.
That's how cults work. It's very efficient.
Yeah.
But as you said, we're getting steps closer to these people falling, because it has to happen.
Well, it will happen because the contradictions involved in their thinking and in their way. You can't govern like a lunatic forever, because you're going to.
There are consequences.
You're going to run into gravity.
Yeah.
You know, they're essentially denying gravity and denying reality, and it's coming back.
As they say, you can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality.
Precisely.
And definitely, you know, on I guess less serious or more serious matters, the depth of all these players, all these countries is exploding upwards.
Right.
Every year.
Well, actually, the new Secretary of the Treasury, or whatever they call it, the Exchequer, from the Labour Party,
in England,
has a new solution. She's redefining debt.
No, well, that's what they do in the last 30 years. You know, it's like for example, GDP. When they weren't able to grow in the 2000s, in the early 2010s. I mean, they started to add stuff that is usually not counted in GDP, such as prostitution, drug dealing, things that shouldn't exist really.
Well, and things that you don't actually have.
And they have no idea. So they basically say, we estimate that the gray economy is about 5 billion, therefore we add it to the GDP, so that, hey, we have growth this year. And next year say, oh, in fact, the gray economy has been growing by 20%, so we have growth. And this is the calculations that indeed you can ignore the reality, but 10 years later you have inflation, and no one ignores inflation, because as we see even in Switzerland or other countries, you saw yesterday they announced that the health insurance is increasing by 6%.
Right.
Now, I don't know how you call that, but that's inflation.
That's a lot, yeah.
And that's a lot, because everyone is paying. For people who don't know Switzerland, we have a mix of private and public health insurance, and it's like for most people it's like 10 to 15% of your earning.
Yeah.
I mean, if you earn $10,000 a month, no, of course, but it's significant. So adding 6% to a significant amount, these are your holidays were gone for most people, even in Switzerland.
Well, what's especially remarkable is that, you know, they just cut the interest rate another quarter point. So basically, you've got your insurance increasing 6%, but your money in the bank is increasing like 0.5%.
Yeah.
And so it's just a lose-lose
and
situation.
the Keynesian solution, which has always been used when there are times of crisis, which is let's spend more money or give people money to spend, when you don't manufacture anything, you're actually giving that money to China or India.
Exactly.
And so you're not helping at all.
Well,
economy.
but I have a solution based on what you suggested. Obviously, what we need to be doing is spending more money on prostitution.
I'm sure politicians do that.
Keep the money in the country. Of course, then they import the prostitutes. So.
Then the prostitutes send the money back to Ukraine, and as an example, and I wouldn't know, and then it's picked up by the government. It's stolen by the government. I don't know what they do.
There's just so you know, there's a saying in Switzerland. It's actually in the Italian part, and they say that if you ever meet a banker with a tall blonde wife,
mm-hmm.
never ask how they met.
Yeah, well, it's quite common. It's quite common. However, the interesting thing is that it comes to what we have been saying for decades now. Exactly what we predicted would happen is happening now. I predicted that the big trouble would start in 2020. You predicted more 2030. We're halfway and it starts to be here. So maybe we're just, we had to average both our work to get the right timing.
It'd be nice if we had a bit more time, but we'll see.
In one way, if I want to be cynical, if it comes too late, we'll be a bit old. If it comes too soon, a lot of people are not ready. So it has to be.
Everyone's not.
It has to be at the right time.
People are not going to be. Nobody's ready for this kind of stuff. It's not the kind of thing you really can be ready for.
No, because what you described at New York or London, this is already 1929. I mean 1930 or 31. For a lot of people, there is a mix of the. It's a mix of the decaying years of the Soviet Union and of the crisis of 1929 and the va-t-en-guerre spirit of 1913, let's say, mm-hmm. without the industries and without the economy that would support any war of any sizable enterprise.
Right.
So, October.
October it is.
Today is September 20-something, 27, 28, 28. 27. Yeah. We'll see how October goes.
Good luck, everybody.
And get ready. Take care.